Hello, conscious community and reality sandwich fans and watchers. Kyle here back with another amazing Share Your Experience interview, joined today by the wonderful Nico Simon. Nico, how's it going today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Kyle. How you doing?
Beautiful, beautiful day as always. Grateful to be here and grateful to be having wonderful conversations with the plant medicine community.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. I'd love for you to give a brief introduction to yourself, who you are, what you do, and your mission. Introduce Journey Home to our audience here.
Sure. I'm the co-founder with my wife of Journey Home. We are a psychedelic concierge service that helps seekers of this kind of work have access or reach highly vetted and experienced guides in a space. And we've been in this space for a couple of years. And that's after a 30-year career corporate America that I decided to make the switch. That's a long story here that I'm happy to share as well, if you'd like.
Yeah, would love to dive. I'm sensing. We've talked briefly about this offline. You're from Brittany. You're from Europe. Curious a little bit about the psychedelic plant medicine culture there. And love to. What were your first steps of plant medicine? Were you a cannabis user as a teenager? How did you kind of evolve to want to take these substances and get involved into your mission now?
Yeah, it's a great question. In fact, nobody's ever asked me that question. Interesting enough. Um, the short answer is I had zero exposure to plant medicine of any kind in France. Uh,
Mhm.
this this was not a permissive culture as far as drugs are concerned, although some areas of the culture use cannabis or hashish, as they call it back there, in different form. Um, but I was part of the drug on war culture, and drugs are bad. So French people are they have wine and alcohol and cigarettes, and that was my exposure to plant medicines, if you will. And I did a lot of that exposure too. So as a true Frenchman, I even part of my career was in a hotel and restaurant business, and I was a sommelier. So I had a lot of access to wine, famous plant medicine. Um, but yeah, so I never had any drug experience in my youth, even during my adult years. Um, but I had a lot of uh, mental health issues from my late teens to my early 50s. Um, Due to trauma, I had severe trauma when I was a kid, in my late teen, and PTSD, and so I had major depression, panic attacks, anxiety, and I literally tried everything I could that was, available to me during that time, during 30 years. Um, and got to a point in late 2018 when I had just tried TMS, transmagnetic stimulation, and that didn't work for me. And I think those were the early days of TMS. So probably my provider wasn't very adept at providing me the treatment. I bet it would be different today. But anyway, be that as it may, my doctor at the time suggested that I do electroconvulsive therapy, which ECT. I had zero interest in trying that. I had someone in my family that had been a recipient of that therapy, and the effects were pretty devastating, actually. So I I've always been a very curious person, and I started thinking, okay, what else is out there? There's got to be a different way. And I very quickly stumbled on the concept of psychedelics for therapy. So I took about a year to study this, listen to all the podcasts, read all the blogs and books, and How to Change Your Mind just came out around that time. So I read that, um, and became convinced that this was something that I wanted to pursue. Um, so I I had been a concierge in my life, and in fact, I was part of the leadership launching the American Express Platinum Concierge program back in the 90s. So it took me literally one phone call to find a very highly experienced guide in the San Francisco Bay Area, and that was my first entry point to the world of psychedelics through an MDMA experience.
Wow, yeah, walk me through. I'd love for you to walk me through that first MDMA experience. And were you nervous, kind of reaching out to contacts and trying to figure out who to serve, who could service me? And would love to hear about the process as well, because this is a journey a lot of people go through. They do their research, they find blogs like Reality Sandwich, YouTube videos out there, but they still, are either afraid to make that first step or make that first informed decision. So what kind of
Yeah.
questions were you asking and what sold you on kind of using that first facilitator?
Yeah, I had read enough to know that safety was paramount for me, and I've always been very careful as to what I put in my body, and and I had a lot of anxiety around triggering previous traumas, around um, at the time I had a fear, and I had had a fear of vomiting my entire life, so I did not want to get into that scenario where I was going to have this ayahuasca type, purging experience. That was not my idea of a good first interaction with the medicine. Also, I knew that I was carrying a lot of baggage emotionally, mentally, with my depression and all that. So I knew that I wanted someone that was also an experienced therapist, a trauma therapist, as part of um, this work. So that was my first requirement, if you will. That person has to be or have been a therapist, specializing in trauma, and that had significant amount of experience with the medicine, in this case MDMA.
Mhm.
And I knew that there were some lineages that I was after in the country in terms of the mentorship and yeah, the lineage on how to serve the medicine in the context and the setting and all of that. So it just happened that the first person that was referred to me was that person that checked all the boxes that I was looking at. Um, Also, I felt that regardless of her being the first person, uh, I needed to feel in these first one or two interactions with that guy that this was going to be a safe place for me you know, to come out with my material, if you will, and that she really understood my fears. And this happened at the first phone call. In fact, the first call was not even a Zoom call; it was a phone call, and
Mhm.
I felt all of that in that call, that I could be safe within that with that person. So, yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, beautiful. So was this first time virtual, or did you eventually fly, make your way to a proper setting and do this, in an environment?
Yeah, it was in person, of course. I've actually never done plant medicine work virtually. I don't feel that. I don't feel, and after maybe 50 medicine experience I've had so far, I've never done a solo one, and I've never done one without a guide. In fact, so um, and that's me. I'm not judging anyone else that does. It's just the way I feel safe. Um,
Mhm.
and So yeah, at the time I lived in Ohio, and there was really no one here in Ohio, so I flew to the San Francisco Bay Area to do that work. Yeah, and I think that was we, my wife and I, who have journey home, feel very strongly about the travel aspect of the work. The journey starts in, when you drive to the airport or do the long drive to the place where you're going to be doing your work. We feel it's a moment where you actually stop your daily life, stop the noise, and start to really focus on yourself and care for yourself. And I actually, I understood that from that first experience. I took, I think it was 4 or 5 days, 2 or 3 days before and a day after, or something like that. And I really saw the value because I was able to really block everything else and start taking care of myself and start eating differently and take long walks, and and really set my intentions and set my mind and prepare for this journey.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'd love to hear how did you prepare for this first MDMA experience, and then walk me through, the whole story, you traveling, the setting, what you guys did there.
Yeah, yeah. So my guide at the time had comes from a lineage that had very specific ways to prepare you for an experience. The first one was around food and drink. So, and of course, before that, I was on SSRIs at the time, on antidepressants. So, my the first preparedness, I guess, was stopping my SSRIs. That guy did not want to have me on those medicines. I know different guides have different approaches to that, and things have changed since then. But at the time, I had to stop. So I did that, and I was SSRI sober 2 weeks before my first experience. Um, the second thing was around the preparation with a guide. We had, I think, 2 or 3 prep sessions over Zoom prior to the experience, where we she got to know me and what were my perceived traumas and challenges, and uh, I got to learn how to set an intention, for a journey, which I'm still learning. Right, you never really know, what's going to happen and everything. But to me, that was my intention, was to end my depression. That was that simple. And uh, yeah, so that was, and I will tell you a little more about what happened from that angle, from the angle of the intention. Then the recommendation from her was that a week before the experience, try to turn into a vegan, if not a vegetarian, but really change your diet completely to really remove the dirty food out of your system. And that also included no more alcohol, uh, not a whole lot of sugar, just trying to, a mini diet, a mini dieta, if you will. And definitely stop alcohol, cannabis. I wasn't a cannabis smoker or anything, but those are recommended 2 or 3 days before the experience if you can't do it before that. Also, it included finding quiet time every day to maybe to meditate and think about the intention, reducing the amount of external stimuli such as TV and social media was also part of that, and avoid spending too much time searching the internet about what an experience should look like. And that's something that I did. I mean, I did not listen to that particular recommendation, and I should have. And I don't no longer do that, but and it probably comes with experience. But I think that impacts your journey psychologically. And enhance your sleep as much as you can, right? And I think, especially when it's your first time, a day or two or maybe 3 days before the experience, you're having trouble sleeping, you're getting nervous, anxious, and that's normal, right? But as much as you can find a better sleep hygiene, it's better. So that's kind of, those are the things that I did to prepare for that first journey. Yeah.
So yeah, that you flew out to San Francisco. What was the setting of the experience? Were there other people there? Also, walk me through kind of how it went down.
Yeah, I think that I do want to. I'll tell you about this. I do want to talk about another journey too, but that one was one-on-one with a guide, and that was in the middle of the redwood forest
Oh wow.
in the Bay Area, which was an absolute amazing setting. A little cottagey house, and just the driving there was amazing. And in fact, my wife dropped me off and picked me up at the end, so I didn't have to worry about that. That's another thing. You don't want to drive to do a journey, and especially not drive from a journey. Um, and we got there, and we make sure everything was okay. Put my stuff on the side, remove my shoes, and then and we did a little intention remembering session and talking about how do you feel in this moment, and um, try to reduce the high energy, try to settle in the space, see around, see what's the place where you're going to be for many hours. Um, and then at some point, she served the medicine, and it's something that you do. it's presented, it's right there. It's up to you to do it or not. The choice is always yours. Um, and then we moved to a different room where there was a bedroom there, which was very nicely curated with nice paintings and Buddhist sculptures, artifacts, and other things. Very comfortable space, warm and cozy. And there was a chair near the bed for the guide. She'd show me where the bathroom is in case I need it, and so on. And then and I started dropping into the experience. Um, and within 45 minutes of ingesting the medicine, I started feeling this big rush of warmth and change. I would say mostly changes in temperature, but very warm and gooey, but at the same time also very high energy. And I would say that that's the point where the guide tells you, okay, put your eye mask on and start, seeing what comes up. And I was quite challenged by that, frankly. And I think it's quite normal for a first experience with what we call heart medicine. With MDMA is there's a lot of thoughts that can come up, and I felt compelled to share with her constantly what was happening because it was very rich, very intense. But I went through in a period of 5-6 hours all the major traumas in my life that came up and how I felt about them. And it was quite interesting in retrospect. You hear that a medicine journey is like 10 years of therapy. That's what it felt like. I felt because I had done 30 years of therapy, right? And it had taken me years and years with one therapist to deliver that kind of material, and not even in that level of depth. I always had challenges with my feelings, and through that experience, I had no challenge with my feelings. It was right there, available. How do I feel about that trauma? And all these things. So, at the end of when I look back at that first experience, what I like to say is what it laid out for me a roadmap of what I had to work on and why I had to work on it, and the associations I was making to did that trauma made me who I am today, and maybe some areas were positive and some not so, and some were creating the bedrock for depression or anxiety or PTSD, right? So my first journey was my roadmap journey, if you will.
Beautiful. Love that. I did a San Pedro ceremony and very much relate. I felt like I got 10 years of therapy in that one session. And,
Mm-hmm.
profound epiphany I really came to was, these medicines are great, but they're just a tool. You need to do the work afterwards and do that integration properly. So I'd love to hear, uh, post that experience, you saw this roadmap. What was your integration period like afterwards?
You know, it was longer than I expected, and it was a little challenging because that first experience was literally a month before COVID.
Oh, wow.
And I had planned a second journey, I think it was in April. And so 2.5, 3 months after that first experience, to do a follow-up journey from that first one to kind of kick things in, right? And so I had several integration sessions with my guide over Zoom, during which actually I had one first in person the next day. I came back to the space, and I was still in the Bay Area, and I was most of it. Actually, most of the first two sessions after the journey was her going through the notes that she had taken, and it were pages, and I think it was 7 pages of notes that she'd taken in small writing of all the stuff that came up. And I was kind of going through it. I said, "Do you remember that? Do you remember that? How was that? How do you feel now?" Based on so it was more of a review of what happened during that time, and kind of laying out the roadmap. Okay, here are the big blocks of Nico's mind and Nico's traumas, and where Nico needs to go from there and what Nico needs to work on. And I was feeling better already. What to me, what it did not only was laying out a roadmap, but also helped me realize that I did not need to take antidepressants.
Hmm.
I did not need to go every day to see a therapist to work on that stuff. I had found my ally, if you will, my the way for me to go through this stuff. So that was my first realization. That was my I guess that the roadmap and that realization were my integration, where came out of that. And now the challenge was where when is my next session so I can start working on that, especially the juicy, the big stuff that I think was very relevant to how I felt. And of course, I couldn't do that until I think the next journey was in August when I could travel
Oh wow.
again and go back to the Bay Area. So I did do ketamine sessions
Hmm.
for from April to July pretty
Hmm.
consistently to kind of keep me afloat, if you will. Um, and then I went back for my second session with that guy in August, and and that was from then on. I felt better, and then I started working on the material, uh, and I had several sessions for. I think I had 3 or 4 journeys over the course of 6 months, where I would work on different aspects of uh, the traumas that had come up, if you will. Uh, and it was helpful, but so I continued to feel better and better, but at some point I felt like stuck.
Hmm.
Um, and that's when she recommended that I do a group work, a group retreat, a men's group.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's my next.
Yeah, please
Next
share how was
development.
the environment, how was that different than working one on one, and what were your expectations, and again, walk me through the setting and the experience there.
Yeah, so I think she recommended that I do that work because there was an aspect of my trauma that was relational, and uh, she thought I was mature enough in the medicine space, having done, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 journeys by then, that I could handle myself in a bigger setting with more people. So I was invited into a men's group that was also in the Bay Area, in a nice setting in Marion Headlands there, and there was a group of about 15 men, and there were about, I think there were 4 guides for that group, and it was a weekend, so there were 2 sessions. There was a session on a Friday night and another journey on a Saturday night. The Saturday night being the biggest journey. The Friday night is more of a get to know each other and get to feel the vibration and drop in and know how and get to learn how you react when you're journeying alongside a bunch of other people, which can be triggering for some people, and start being open and vulnerable with other men that are not therapists, that are probably also have their own challenges. And the big learning for me there was, wow, there's a lot of other people that are suffering out there, and interesting enough, all of our suffering resembles one another. They may have different sources and everything, but the result is the same, and the result is often trauma, that shows up in various ways. Um, I'll fast forward to the second night, which was probably my most challenging journey to date, and
Oh
so
wow.
the setting was in a big yurt,
Hmm.
where big enough that it was 15 of us comfortably, laying around, and the 4 guides, and so we were all in like a big circle, and then the 4 guys were in the middle, and the medicine was mushroom that night, and uh, I took a pretty large dose. I took about 7 grams of mushroom that night,
Oh
which was
wow.
my highest before that was 4. So that was a big jump, and I don't think I realized how much I was taking when I. But it's probably what I needed. Let's put it this way, to really drop in, and the so I told you about my fear of vomiting, right, earlier on, and that's something that was, if you rewind back through my 30 years or 35 years of mental health challenges and PTSD and panic attacks, when I had a panic attack, the main manifestation of it was a sudden wave of extreme nausea, like I'm going to purge now if I don't escape this situation, right? And so I've always afraid that this would happen. And it so happens that mushroom, I don't handle the come up on mushroom very well. It's usually very nauseating for me, and
Yeah,
very
been there.
intense. Been there, right? So my first dose was 4.5. That was before the booster, right? Um, and the medicine started coming up, and I was feeling pretty nauseous, but I wasn't feeling very very high, if you will. And I thought, it's probably because I had just done mushroom the night before, and probably needed a bigger dose. So the guy suggested that, you want a booster. I'm like, sure, might as well. I'm here, right? I got to do this, and I had some very important stuff to work on. I was trying to find. My intention was to find the source, the very origin of my trauma, right? Because I had remembered in a previous journey that I had a major panic attack when I was 3 years old in a particular situation, and so I said, my trauma is very old, and that was me having a panic attack at 3 years old. What happened before that, right? That would set the setting for that. So I take the medicine and I start going, and it was the mask on for the whole time, right? So you're not allowed to interact with anyone except for a guide if you need help. And I shit you not, for 5 hours, I was dying for 5 hours. I kept asking the guide, "Am I still alive?" I was so deep, and every time the music was changing, and it was a beautiful setting, and one of the guides played 22 instruments, and it was
Oh wow.
constantly playing, and but every time the music was really influencing my journey in ways that was very challenging, to the point that I kept having these waves of nausea and waves of running out of air, and like I was dying. And at one point towards the end, I was looking at the top, the dome in the yurt, and it was night, right? So, and the dome was bright, like there was full lights, like operating room lights, okay, in your face. And and the feeling was I was coming from dark to light as the waves were coming, and I was coming as I was getting close to the light. I was having more challenges breathing. I was like running out, like suffocating, like somebody was constricting my throat. So I couldn't figure what that was, but I was I still can see it now, just visiting that memory. And so the next day, I called my OG, my original guide, uh, and I recount the story to her. And she says, "Do you know what happened during your birth?" I'm like, "No, I know it was long and challenging for my mom, but and we lived in Africa at the time, so I wasn't born in great conditions to start with." She said, "Well, why don't you give her a call and find out what she can tell you?" So I called my mom the next day, and she said, "I thought I told you." Like, told me what? She said, "When you were born, your umbilical cord was wrapped around your throat, and my birth was 18 hours long. So for 18 hours,
Oh
I
wow.
basically ran out of oxygen constantly for 18 hours, and so in no uncertain ways, I relived my birth during that journey, my challenging
Wow.
birth. And that basically what was happening is like during the entire journey, I was having panic attacks after panic attacks after panic attacks. And that was, as I saw it, the origin of my panic attacks and my how I process anxiety and fear is through these feeling that were imprinted in me during my birth. And that was really the most riveting journey, I guess. And I've had many riveting journeys, but in terms of learning, understanding the origin of trauma, I don't think I would have ever been there had I not done this particular journey.
It's wild how, subconsciously these things get imprinted on us before we even have memory here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think is about, the psilocybin versus the MDMA you feel, either helps your trauma journey and your therapy, and do you like to combine both now, or did you feel you felt complete after that particular dose?
Uh, I have not done a mushroom only journey since then.
Hmm.
I have I combine MDMA and mushroom now. It's my favorite place to be because I still don't enjoy the come up on mushroom, and the MDMA, to start with, the MDMA really cuts that off and puts you in more open hearted space. I don't have to take a lot of MDMA, but it helps me it helps me appreciate the mushroom more. So I find my balance in MDMA with mushroom together, and I'm saying MDMA can be another heart opener, MDA as well, or 3-MMC or whatnot. Those all work well for me. Just having a heart opener at the beginning of the journey helps me really drop in better into the mushroom space. Um, to me, I like to start with MDMA because it's not hallucinogenic, and I'm able to really work on material that I work with in a from a therapeutic angle, and I can be alert and clear enough in my head to process that stuff. Then I like to drop into the mushroom because it's more of a spiritual experience, and it can bring me insights that I would not have on MDMA or anything else. So yeah, that's my preferred approach here.
After talking with your mother and kind of reliving this traumatic birth and understanding that's where maybe the source of your trauma came from, what was your integration like after that? How did you process that info? How did you communicate with your wife and family on this, kind of impact and your journey with plant medicine? How did that evolve into the journey you're on now and the mission you're on?
Yeah. Oh wow, that's 16 questions into one here. um, for me, it was I'm still integrating. I don't think you ever
Hmm.
done integrating. I'm still integrating
Hmm.
that one. Have I had another panic attack since then? I've had mini panic attacks, but now I'm able to process them and okay, I recognize this is fear about what's going on, or this is my body telling me that maybe what I'm doing in this moment is not right for me. So I don't need to reach for the benzodiazepines or to a whiskey or something else to tame down that dragon that's happening in that moment. I pretty quickly realize, okay, this is what's going on, and I'm able to change my whatever trajectory I'm on in this moment.
Hmm.
Um, I've been very open with my wife and my children about my journey all along, so they knew about it right, the day after or a few days after it happened, and to an extent, they really helped me process stuff, especially my wife. And she's very intuitive in general. She doesn't need medicine for that. And she's helped me process a lot of things. I think a partner helping you along the way is really good. I've I've not really shared too much with my parents. If you would, I think they're from a different generation, and I think there's a lot of blame and shaming going on there that Um, I don't want to put them through
Mhm.
that. I don't think it's necessary. It's not my mom's fault that I was born with my umbilical cord on my neck. It's not. They did their best they could raising me and my four siblings, and I don't get into that. I think that I've uh, processed all of these things for myself, and I still am, like I said, to some extent, processing some of them. Um, but it informed me uh, and my wife about the possibilities of healing, specifically trauma, but also other things with plant medicines. And it is through so that place where I was at that particular group medicine work, I came back to it 6 months later for another one, and that one was indeed very different in the sense that instead of having a mask on, I felt compelled. As soon as the medicine was coming up, it was basically telling me you need to sit up and watch. And I sat up and watched for 6 hours. I just looked around, and interesting enough, that day the medicine did not hit me like it does usually. It wasn't very. It was a little bit hallucinogenic, but not really. It was more very inspirational and spiritual, and that's when I got the message to start Journey Home. In that particular experience, when I was looking at guides helping journeyers through their difficult passages and so on, and I kept thinking about how wonderful it would be to help other people have access to that. I said, I'm privileged. I got access. I'm better. How can I help? And this is where the inspiration for Journey Home came. So that was my
Beautiful.
yeah.
For those, yeah, for those who are just scratching the surface, how do you bring your experience in concierge and being a sommelier and working with groups of people like that to the Journey Home experience, and kind of walk me through the process if I'm a first time, somebody exploring your programming.
Yeah, for sure. So what's a concierge? It's a connector. You,
Mhm.
Kyle, could be a concierge. You're a wonderful connector. It's a networker. It's someone that's able to find sources for whatever. When I was on the American Express Platinum Card
Mhm.
program, it was to find restaurants and hotels and expensive villas in Italy and all that stuff, right? Um, and being really a seeker of things. Um, it's not very different in what we do at Journey Home. We
Mhm.
spend our time seeking for the best guides
Mhm.
uh, and providers in this space. Not just medicine guides, but there's also different kinds of breathwork providers, therapists, all kinds of different modalities. And it is really our job to understand these guys and what's their story. Why are they in this space? What challenge? I mean, pretty much all of them is a wounded healer. Have
Mhm.
gone through their pain. You don't
Mhm.
become a therapist with no pain, no trauma, nothing in your life that challenged you and made you want to help others with it. And we dive deep with our guides in their life story, in their childhood, in their passions, in their hobbies, in their challenges, in their battles, in all of that to really understand who they are. And what happens is when seekers come to us with their own challenges, with their own life story, we're able to almost instantly make connections with someone in our network that has gone through the same thing. And, or maybe not exactly the same thing, but something very similar where they can have a point of connection. Um, I'll give you an example. Uh, a few months ago, a seeker came to us. He was a work in Hollywood, highly uh, in in a celebrity um, world,
Mhm.
and that person came from Iran originally, had gone through severe trauma through war, had been uh, I won't go into the details because I don't want to reveal who that is, but I've gone through some very significant trauma. Probably one of the most traumatized person that we've seen so far. Highly functioning individual, but needed help for sure. And within 10 or 15 minutes of talking to that person, we knew we had the perfect guide in our network, someone that actually was from the same country as he was from, the same era, same age. I'd gone through some very similar trauma and happened to live 30 minutes from him.
Oh, wow.
And that was an instant match, if you will. I mean, we always give people 2 matches when we match them, with guides. But that one was like there was no way the other guide was going to get a chance, and that's what happened, right? It was just so perfect, and it's we often have, it's very rare for us not to find points of connections between a seeker and a guide, and we usually write about that, and so that's our concierge mindset that we apply to this work.
Beautiful. Well, Nico, thank you for sharing with me today. Where can people follow you? Where can they get in contact and reach Journey Om and discover, work with you to find their healer?
Yeah, just go to journeym.life on the web. It's journeym.life on Instagram, and you can also email me at connect@journeym.life.
Beautiful. Nico, thank you for sharing with me today.
Thank you, Cal. I appreciate the opportunity.